Yeah, so today talking about encouragement, and I guess the truth is we all need encouragement, right? And really encouraging to hear all what's been going on in your lives earlier. Whether we are encouraged or not can be make or break point for all of us. First of all, I just wanted to define encouragement, what it isn't and what it is. Encouragement is not fake positivity. Helen mentioned this last week, like was it toxic positivity last week? You know, if you tell yourself or other people lies to feel better, that's not encouragement, that's denial. And number two, encouragement is not minimizing the situation. So have you ever heard people say, oh, why are you sad? Don't be sad. You have so much to be happy about. That's called gaslighting. That's not encouragement. Yeah. So what is the accurate definition? To encourage in this context is simply to inspire yourself or someone else with courage, spirit, or hope by using the truth. And you might ask, well, because the first part is we're looking at how to encourage ourselves, right? Why do we need to know how to encourage ourselves? Why doesn't God just encourage us? Why do we have to do it? And to answer that, I want to look at the story of David in the Bible. You can turn to it if you want to, but I'll probably just do a summary. 1 Samuel 30. At this important time, David, God has anointed him and promised him that he will be the next king of Israel. But he's actually fled Israel because the current king of Israel wants to kill him. And so David and his men, they're wanderers. They don't have a home. They're just roaming around. They've set up camp in this place called Ziklag, and they went off to like hunt and raid, and they've come back and they find that their wives, their sons and their daughters all the animals, the livestock have all been taken captive by a neighboring tribe called the Amalekites. If you were in David's shoes, how would you respond at this point? The Bible tells us that David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. That's a deep pain, like really indescribable kind of pain. And I wonder if you have been there, where you've faced a situation and you've just cried and cried until you can't cry anymore. The Bible goes on to say that also David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. Talk about needing a break, To summarize, the current king of Israel wants David dead. His two wives has been captured. And I'm not suggesting that guys should have two wives, by the way. Okay, but no one's perfect. And now his own men are talking about killing him too. How many of us at this point would turn to God and say, yo, what the heck, man? I thought I was going to be king, but right now things are not going well. Are you not going to do something? Do you even care? I thought you were my protector and my provider. But David doesn't do that. Instead, the end of verse 6 tells us, but David found strength in the Lord his God. In the King James translation, it actually says, but David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. That's right. And notice, verse 6, the circumstance hadn't changed, okay? God didn't suddenly swoop in and save him and return all the families and change his men's minds. Yet, after verse 6, you can see something has changed in David. So what exactly happened? I would break it down into 3 points. So first, David had actually acknowledged and grieved his situation. We talked about how David had wept until he could weep no more. He'd given himself space to, feel all the emotions he needed to in the face of a painful situation. When we are faced with painful seasons and hard circumstances, we need to give ourselves permission to grieve and feel all the emotions we need to as well. Number 2, David knew with his whole being that God was his God. Here's verse 6 again, but David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. So even though the circumstances were stacked against him, David had a personal relationship with God, and he knew the character of God. He knew God cared about him. And that's really important because it's very hard to trust someone that you don't actually know. It's a lot easier in those circumstances to turn to your own quick fixes or other idols if our interaction with God on a day-to-day basis is minimal. And so that leads to the last point, which is that David chose to believe God over his circumstance. Because of his deep relationship with God, I believe David resolved to trust in the promises of God, that God was his rescuer and provider, and that no matter how dark the valley ahead of him looked like, it was no match for God. Do you remember right before I went into the story about David, I asked, why do we need to be able to encourage ourselves? In David's example, it's quite easy to see why, because apart from God at that point, he didn't have anyone else. Even his own men were turning against him at this point. And in our lives, we may face a similar situation. Like, I hope not, but the truth is it might happen. There may not be a single other person in your life who is encouraging you. But the good news is that you have the power to encourage yourself in the Lord, your God. And there was another question, right? So why do we need to be able to encourage ourselves? And then why doesn't God just encourage us, right? The truth is God is actually always encouraging us. We are the ones who don't accept his encouragement. And let me tell you why. Because God is truth, right? The truth is God. So when we choose to believe in the truth, when we accept it and we reject the lie, that is God himself encouraging us and comforting us. And, yes, sometimes God does send an actual person, or he changes a circumstance to encourage us. And yes, we can ask and pray for that, and we should. But remember, God didn't create us to be passive people. If we're always just waiting for something to happen, we become powerless when we could actually encourage ourselves. And we see with David, God didn't send someone to change David's circumstance. David chose to encourage himself and strengthen himself through the truth of God. Afterwards, you read, after that, he then goes to the priest to inquire of God whether or not to pursue the Amalekites and whether he would overtake them. God tells David, yes, go. So David goes and he catches them. He takes back every single person and animal that was taken. Nothing, no one is missing. And God could have used any number of ways to bring those kidnapped people back, right? He could have teleported them, He could have put disease specifically on the Amalekites and everyone else escaped, anything. But instead, he chose to partner with David for David's benefit, right? You see, because these trials, these things that David goes through, it builds up his relationship with God. It builds up his faith. And actually, you can also see God's hand of protection throughout the whole story. So think about it. When the Amalekites took everyone, they didn't kill a single person. Is that just coincidence? In the story as well, if you read it, David is led to the Amalekites because of this Egyptian slave. And the only reason that the Egyptian slave is there is because he got sick 3 days ago and then was abandoned by his Amalekite master. Is that a coincidence? That the slave just happened to get sick at that particular time and his master just happened to abandon him at that particular time, and David just happened to find him at that particular time. God was always there working behind the scenes. So to reiterate, how do we encourage ourselves? Firstly, we need to build our relationship with God. How can you trust him when times are tough if you don't even know him and trust him when times are good? Number 2, feel your feelings. Acknowledging them is just being honest with yourself. It's just living in reality. That's acknowledging reality. And number 3, as you do that, then you can choose to believe the truth over being afraid or disappointed over the circumstance. And I just point out there that the journaling process is really helpful. Figuring out how we feel and then recognizing what the truth is and then choosing to believe the truth. And I know there might be some of us who might not know the journaling process. For the sake of time, I might just wait until the end to see if we have time. But if not, I think there's enough of us who know it that in our groups we could probably discuss it as well. And so just a personal story. As we said earlier, Jerry and I are going away very soon for 6 months. There was a period of time a couple of weeks ago when a whole bunch of things happened all in similar timing, which is like we were looking for someone to take over our flat and we had put through to potential tenants, and one after the other. And they initially were both like really keen, yeah, we'll take it and stuff. But then at the last minute, they pulled out and they didn't sign the tenancy agreement. And so we were stressed because if we don't find someone to take over our flat, it means we have to pay a lot of money until our lease ends. And at the same time, we're trying to sell one of our cars. And then our other car, someone bumped into it. So then it needed, fixing. And that was a couple of $100. And then the WAF was due. So we took that car to the WAF. Well, the mechanic took the car to the WAF. And then the WAF failed. We were told, apparently, by the inspector that our tail lights weren't standard and the car was too noisy. So it just seemed like, everything was happening at once and we're just getting knocked down and knocked down. And honestly, both Jerry and I had our moments during that period of time. But what really kept me going, first of all, was being honest with God. Just going to him when I was feeling like, God, I'm anxious. I'm worried that we're not going to sell our car. I'm worried we're not going to find someone to take over our flat. Just being really honest with him. And then asking him for help, and then recalling all the times that he has come through for us in the past, and recalling all his promises to us. So literally, God, you're our provider. You know what we need before we say a word. Not one sparrow drops to the ground without you knowing about it, and we are worth more than many sparrows to you. We would do this multiple times a day because we'd be anxious multiple times a day. God is gracious. He did send encouragement to us through the form of friends and family, and we're really grateful for that. But it really was because you're anxious and then you can go into a spiral, but it was like that constant going back to God. And the thing is, there isn't anyone who's as soon as you're anxious, you could be anxious multiple times a day, and as soon as you're anxious, they're there for you and they're there encouraging. That no one can do that, right? You have to, this is why we need to learn how to do it ourselves. Like David, who, he encouraged himself and then he went out and did what he needed to do. We didn't just sit there and expect God to just do everything, right? We did our part, which is we actively posted on Facebook groups and Trade Me, and we got to the bottom of the WAF issue, went back to the car dealership, and it turns out the AN and Glen Innes gave us incorrect information about the tail lights. That's not actually an issue that they can fail us on. And how loud a car is subjective. So my recommendation is don't ever go to AA Glen Innes to get your WAF done. Take it or leave it, but just our experience. But also, praise God, because someone bought our car, the other car, and someone has taken over our flat. Both people named Paul, interestingly enough. But, for Jerry and I, this is a reminder to us about why we can trust God. Now, when we look back, this will be another reminder in the future when we're going through a rough time. Hey, remember that time that God came through to us. For us, he'll come through again. Okay, so moving on to how to encourage others. First of all, why do it? Well, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11 tells us, encourage one another and build each other up, just in fact you are doing. And also, did you know that encouragement, there's actually a gift of encouragement from God? Romans chapter 12 verses 8-6 says, we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. So the body of Christ is the reflection of God on earth, right? So if one part of us is hurting, then we all hurt. And while we all need to learn how to encourage ourselves, that doesn't negate the fact that we are also called to encourage others. So here are some foundational things, I think, about encouragement for someone else. First of all, giving encouragement must come out of genuine care for the other person. This isn't I guess I will do it because I have to. Encouraging others comes out of a heart of love for them because we're aligned with God's heart, right? When we see someone hurting or in pain, our hearts should be moved by compassion. So in order to be a good encourager, we need to genuinely care about that person and want what is best for them. Okay, there cannot be any sense of wanting to get something for yourself or prove something to yourself. It could be whether it's because someone else's pain makes you feel uncomfortable, so you want them to feel better, so then you feel better, or whether you're measuring your worth based on whether you can make someone else feel better. That's not encouragement, that's manipulation. Number 2, giving encouragement does not equate to fixing something for someone. Okay, good encouragers know that they're not responsible for that person's problem. Okay, and don't get me wrong, if you have the capacity and the capability to do something for someone, by all means, yes, do it, right? But good encouragers know that it is up to the individual themselves to choose to believe the truth and then work from there. And number 3, giving encouragement does not equate to giving advice. And I'm sure we've been there. We tell someone that we're struggling with something, and then they immediately launch into a barrage of advice and tell us, my friend's son did this, maybe you should do that. And, all you wanted was for someone to listen to you. Have they given you permission to give advice? Have they asked for advice? If not, don't give it. You can ask them, hey, do you want some advice? If they say no, don't give advice. Okay, so based on those foundations, then how can we be good encouragers? Don't make assumptions. How do we not make assumptions? Well, seek to listen first. Understanding their point of view, putting yourself in their shoes. David Riddell he doesn't make any suggestions in the first half of his counseling sessions. He simply asks questions, and that's because he wants to understand what is going on. In the Bible, there was a disciple called Barnabas, and he's known as the son of encouragement. His real name was Joseph, but because of his character and the way that he encouraged so many people, the disciples nicknamed him Barnabas, which is Greek for son of encouragement. And Barnabas had a reputation for coming alongside people, especially the sketchy people that everyone else didn't want to hang out with. He was like a bridge builder who kind of brought people together. And one of the people that he came alongside was Paul, who, if you don't know, he was first a Pharisee who actually loved to kill Christians. But then he had this miraculous encounter with God, and he completely changed. And the other disciples, rightly so, were really Paul sketchy. They didn't believe he'd actually changed. But guess who got to know him? Barnabas. Acts chapter 9, verse 26, it says, when he, Paul, came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he was really a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. So, Barnabas didn't make assumptions. He sought to understand Paul. He came alongside him and sought to understand and listen first. And then lastly is to speak the truth in love. Like I said earlier, in the foundations of giving encouragement, we're not out here telling lies to make someone feel better, okay? If someone's made a mistake and they're feeling upset about it, we don't tell them, oh, it's not your fault, if it is their fault, But we can tell them, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. I know it's an awful feeling. And then depending on what mindset or state they're in, share a truth coach. Sometimes people can be so upset that sharing a truth coach in that moment doesn't actually help. But I guess that's a discernment thing. And sometimes actually the most encouraging thing you could do is just to sit with someone in their pain. You don't have to say anything at all. Your presence tells them, speaks volumes, right? Your presence tells them that, hey, I'm here. I see you in your pain. I'm grieving with you. You're not alone. At the end of the day, I've given you, some things about what I think about encouragement and some foundational things. But because when we're encouragement is for someone else, and everyone is different, and so is their situation, there's kind of no copy and paste formula, right, about exactly what to say or things like that. And that's where the Holy Spirit comes in, because we need his discernment and leading and guidance when we're encouraging other people. And so if you're in a tough situation and you don't know what to say, ask the Holy Spirit for help. my last note is that sometimes we will make mistakes when we're encouraging people. We might say the wrong thing. I definitely have done. You can just ask Jerry. There've been multiple times where my intention was to try and encourage him, but it wasn't really encouraging. And for those of us who struggle with making mistakes, it's hard, but remember, it's not a judgment on our character. It's how we learn. So that's all I have to say. Yeah. If you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Jessie.
No worries. Or anything to add? Yeah.
So, does encouraging yourself involve telling yourself the truth?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, because you're like choosing to believe the truth over the circumstance, right? Yeah. And that's part of the journaling process, which you could discuss in your groups after. Hello?
Is there a way to know whether to just sit with them in their bed and, like you said, say it's okay to feel that way and stuff? And then, how do you know just to do that versus and then add on truth coaching? Because I feel like when I've encouraged people, wasn't encouraging. I think I went too far. or they weren't ready, they were just in pain.
Yeah. Look, it's really touch and go because I feel like half the time I do the same to Jerry. For me...
Can I answer that?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
You said you do it to me all the time.
Yeah.
You can just ask them.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you want right now? Then you don't have to guess. Because it's different every day.
Yeah. Yeah, you can ask, is it okay for me to tell you truth coach right now?
Sometimes I'm just like, no.
I was like, okay.
Yeah. I'm like, no. I just need some space. And other times I'm like, yeah. That would be really helpful. But there's no way to there's no formula.
Yeah, there's no formula.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even, like with Jerry, who I say is someone who, I know probably the best in the world. I still don't know sometimes when it's good to say a truth coach or without asking him. Yeah.
That's being relational, isn't it?
Yeah.
Encourage means instill confidence. So well done bringing up this topic.
Cool. Instill confidence. Awesome.
I will send some questions. Just give them to me.
Encourage. Yes. What?
Yeah, literally, it is put courage in.
So good.
So you ask the person if you want to be encouraged. So then you ask the...
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily asking, hey, do you want to be encouraged? But it's kind of like, hey, can I tell you some truth right now? Can I tell you the truth right now?
Well, even a step back, you can just ask them, say you're upset, right? And I'm a friend coming to you. I can just ask you, hey, what do you need right now?
Yeah.
Well,
you guys are very mature because I myself don't know the answer of what I need.
so if you say, I don't know, that's also an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you could say, you can come with different ideas like, is it okay if I just sit with you? Or, because sometimes actually that question can be a bit overwhelming. If you're really going through something, you're feeling all your emotions, it's really hard to figure out what you need, right? So actually it can be helpful if the other person just gives different suggestions. Can I just sit with you? Can I give you a hug? Can I make you some tea? Give them things that it's kind of like a yes or no answer for them, which makes it easier for them. Yeah.